much of his bio as he's going to share his journey with us. But I thought I should share a few points and highlight what Mike has been doing. He has the coolest job in Washington, other than working for the Atlas Corps, being a fellow. He's the agency youth coordinator at Usaid. Among his accomplishments in his 30 years in development are, he helped develop Global Youth Service Day, celebrated every April in over 100 countries, with over 1 million participants, highlighting the year-round contribution of youth to their communities. He traveled for a year with the international singing/performing group up, with the people performing for over 200,000 people. Welcome, Mike.
It's great to sing today, I promise.
Yeah. It's great to have someone with long view of Atlas Corps to talk to this GLL. So my question will start. Tell us a bit about your career path and lesson you've learned along the road of development and life.
Thanks. That's a big question. First of all, good afternoon. Checking to see if you're awake or if already you're in the slump from after lunch. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. That's way better. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Tabitha, and thank you to everyone who's organizing the GLL. I actually go back pretty far with Atlas Corps. I've had 7 Atlas Corps fellows. Right now I have the pleasure of working with Awolaji and Akena, and so it's been really great over my probably almost 8, 9, 10 years now. I've had 7 Atlas Corps fellows, so I really appreciate what each of you bring to the experience of working with, whether they be government or non-government or private sector partners here, and bringing your experience to that. And it is a partnership. And so it's been really a great experience. And from that, I want to at least try and draw from my own experience kind of what the pathway was that brought me to, yes, the coolest job in Washington, other than working for Atlas Corps and being an Atlas Corps fellow. Because the journey started, like was mentioned, about 30 years ago. And I think there's kind of 3 lessons that I'll share with you that kind of relate to your theme of this week, if I could. And those are basically, one, that service to others is what it's all about. The biggest question that you will ever get asked is kind of, what is your purpose? And to me, we each answer it a different way. But for me, it was about, service to others and how we are in this kind of sense of radical kinship with each other, working on issues together, and that I can't get ahead unless I know that I'm working with others, that we're all moving ahead. And I'll talk a little bit about that. Second, never be afraid to stretch. Not just stretch after lunch, but stretch in what you think you can do. And I'll share with you just a couple examples. And the third is, if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans. Because your plans will always change. And the biggest thing that you should be thinking about as young leaders and social entrepreneurs is really having your aperture and your camera or your vision open to where the different roads can lead you. I know I thought I was going to be a sports broadcaster when I was 18. I was prepared to go to university to study that. And a couple of things happened, and suddenly I'm here talking with all of you about how, there it is, today's cover of Time magazine. The Youthquake is transforming the world. Cover of Time magazine is all about you. So if you haven't read it, get a copy of Time magazine, because it's cool to see that is the issue of the day and quite frankly of the decade. So let me start with kind of that first question. A lot of times you will ask yourself, or others might ask you, what is your purpose? What is this all about at the end of the day? Is it about happiness? Is it about wealth? Is it about recognition and fame? For me, I started out early on in probably secondary school being involved with a group called Special Olympics, which some of you may know. And I got working with Special Olympics, and it wasn't about serving as much as being in solidarity with young people with disabilities and being a part of that. And through that, I got to really catch the fire of what that feels like when you're actually in true service and in solidarity with others. And it kind of built from there in terms of the opportunities that I took advantage of. And that kind of led me to what was mentioned. I traveled for a year with a group called Up With People, which is an international performing group. The cast had 100 members from 22 countries. It's almost like we took this room and let's get on a bus for a year in planes and perform all around the world. And that's basically what we did. And it's been around since 1965, mixing music, arts, performance, service, and leadership as a way of bringing all those pieces together. And that, again, transformed me. I never thought I would ever go to Latin America. That wasn't in my picture. And our cast traveled for 6 months doing probably about 150 shows in 50 different cities there and living with host families everywhere we went. And it was the service we did there that changed what I wanted to do. I said, I don't want to be a sports broadcaster. I want to work in like community development and community organizing. And so I reapplied. I went to Georgetown University, which is where Scott and I got to know each other through the alumni program there. And I studied at the School of Foreign Service. And again, it was about kind of thinking through these different opportunities that we had. And when I finished, similar to some of you, I said, you know, I want to continue to make that impact out there. And so I did a 2-year program where I actually set up my own organization called Hands Across the Border to take American U.S. graduates to other countries, Haiti, Honduras, and Mexico, to do a year or 2 of service. And so again, that built the buzz, and that led me to my second epiphany in life, and that was never be afraid to take advantage of those stretches in your life, things that seem beyond what you're ready for. So I was applying to work with at-risk youth in Mexico with UNICEF, and I came up to New York to interview for the job that I'd been interviewing for down there, and they said, we don't have a job in Mexico. Oh, those silly people at the office there, they always think they have a job there. And I was like, oh, because I thought that was the next step of what I was going to do. So I was suddenly stuck. And they said, listen, you're not qualified. You've got 2 years work experience after college. I said, will you at least do the informational interview? And we did. And I told them where I thought I could be of help. And they said, the positions you're going for right now have 2 50-year-old professionals. One has a doctorate, one has a master's degree. I said, if you wouldn't mind just sending my application down to those 2 things. The first one didn't even look at it. The second one, the country director that just happened to be looking for someone that was kind of like me. He was tired of trying to manage a 50-year-old coworker, and he wanted someone to write his annual report in English. And I was like, and he took me on, and suddenly, I'm 26 years old, and I'm managing a team of 19 people at UNICEF as the deputy director in the Dominican Republic. I'm like, holy crap. So I spent some days crying in my house going, I am not capable of managing 19 people who are all older than me, and looking, why did this guy get this job? And 2, I had to my boss gave me all of his invites to go to diplomatic receptions because he was tired of going. And I would go there and they'd look at, who's this young guy who's at our reception? I'd go hide out in the bathroom for an hour until I started making friends with someone. Now that wasn't my whole life, but at the beginning, I was like, should I even be here? And then I said, you know what? They picked me, I'm gonna do my best, I'm gonna learn, I'm gonna outwork anybody I can to make myself be effective. And that's part of it. God opens these windows, we take advantage of it, and you may not feel that you're ready, but if you work hard, you stretch, and you look for good mentors. That was the key. I found a couple good mentors. And man, they helped me grow into what it is to manage and what it is to lead. And that really made a difference for me. And then the third lesson was that, so I thought I was going to be working for UNICEF the rest of my life. And I came back and I did my graduate work here and got married to my wife. And all of a sudden, we were pregnant with our first, and I didn't go back to UNICEF. And I started working for a new organization, a foundation. And I started working community development across Latin America. And then that led to a position. Every time we had a child, I changed my job. So each of my 3 children, their names are the names of the organizations I work with. No. So my daughter, UNICEF, and my son, Youth Service America, and my other daughter, Inter-American Foundation. That's how you know the names of my children. No. And so each time I had to kind of change my vision. But it was funny because you'll be out there, and as long as you put yourself out there and you see these opportunities, it's okay to like not get stuck into like one vision of what your future is, because there's so many great opportunities. My dad worked 35 years at Kodak, same company all his life. In this world, you will probably change your job probably about 10 times, you know? And so 2.5, 4 years in a position, that's about the average now. So we have to be lifelong learners, ready to look at how we take our skill sets and adapt. And I'm going to talk to you just a minute about what we've learned about the development field and what you should be thinking about if you want to work in international development. But anyhow, just to kind of close out, so I worked for a foundation, which was great. One of the cool things about taking advantage of opportunities, I've worked for faith-based organizations, the UN, the US government, a university, the private sector. It's not that I've been fired from all these jobs. Let's make it clear. I move around about every 4 years, and for those who know how long I've been in this current job, you're like, are you leaving in 6 months? No, not yet, because I really do love my job. So anyhow, all of that led to, I worked for Peace Corps then for the longest period of time, 9 years, and it was like, we have this saying about Peace Corps, the hardest job you'll ever love, and it absolutely was. But it was the best job because it was working with young leaders like all of you that were going to other countries that wanted to be in development, but also understood the value of that cultural learning, to be cultural ambassadors of their country and to learn back. And it wasn't easy, man. You know, if I cried some nights and hid in the bathroom, so did they, a lot. Because it's really hard to go to a different culture and be accepted and then build that network of support. It's stressful, you know, life is stressful. But every one of them that I'm still in touch with, today they look back at that moment as that defined their level of grit, their ability to know that I can overcome those challenges. And most of all, they realized they came thinking they were going to get all these things done in a community or an organization. And it was often the small things of what they changed about people's perception about Americans, or what changed in their perception about people from the Dominican Republic when they came back, or how they helped a group of young people to improve their entrepreneurship skills. It wasn't the massive things, it was the small things, but that helped transform them. So, I know I'm running on. I'll finish up in a second. So that brings me to my current job. So there was a little stint where for 3 years I worked in Central America on gang prevention programming. And again, that was super powerful because it was understanding how to work at the government level, putting in place a national policy on gang prevention, working at the municipal levels, creating municipal violence prevention committees with youth, faith-based, police, municipality, community groups, and then working directly with young leaders in a movement called Youth Against Violence across Central America. And that was really transformational because it was like, how do we change a perception where I had a businessman, I was talking with, it was the Rotary Club of El Salvador, and when I started that meeting, he said the only solution to gangs is to kill them. He literally said that at the opening of our Rotary meeting. And then I showed him a video of one of the young people we worked with who had just had his baby, and we'd done a 3-minute video, which was a letter from Hugo to his newborn. And Hugo had been a gangbanger, but he told the story of how he ended up in the gang. And it goes through 13 different factors that kind of led to him. It wasn't almost his choice. It was like a failing school, a disintegrating family environment, a environment surrounded by violence. And at the end of it, that same guy actually was the first one to speak up at the table, and he said, you know what? If I had been in those same circumstances, I would have joined the gang too. And so it was creating that sense of empathy and then thinking, all right, what do you do now to build that bridge? So that brought me then finally to my current job as agency youth coordinator. And the reason it's such a great job is my mission statement is, A, to work with our mission staff all around the world to improve the quality of programming and the amount of programming that engages young people in health, in education, in entrepreneurship, in violence reduction, in food security. And B, to work with young leaders around the world to strengthen how we work in partnership with them and build this continuum of civic education, civic engagement, leadership development, and advocacy to transform development. We put in place 5 years ago a policy, the first bilateral donor called the Youth and Development Policy, where we changed our chip from we're going to work with at-risk youth and we work kind of on them, to we need to figure out how do we engage people like you in each country to be our partners on our project, and beyond rhetoric, because Lord knows there's enough rhetoric. And I tell every place I go, if someone says you're the hope of the future, the leaders of the future, stand up, say, sorry, we got too much to do, walk out. Honestly, because you got way too much that you have to do now for your generation to be getting a pause button saying, come back when you're older. So part of my job right now is to work on what's called positive youth development. Sounds squishy, but it's basically based on 30 years of evidence of what really works in youth programming. It's helping young people have the skills and assets, the sense of agency and empowerment, the opportunity to be change makers, and the enabling environment in every sector we work in. And the good news is last year we had over $1.1 billion in new programming on youth programming around the world, in countries in Nigeria, in Pakistan, and all around the world. And so that's been one of the really satisfying things for me. That was a really long run-on. Never run on as long as I just did.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. What I'm hearing from you is taking opportunities, and you remind me of Nelson Mandela's quote, talking about servant leadership and how it's important to let others just go ahead and lead them from behind. Thank you so much for sharing your advice and lessons. So my second question will be, do you have any recommendation for fellows on how to connect with or work with the Usaid in their home countries?
So this is a lost opportunity sometimes. I talked to a lot of YALI fellows, for example, and some of the young Latin American initiative fellows, YLI, about this. When you come back, you think you're going to come back into an environment where there's resources and there's all this respect and there's all these opportunities, and you get back there and there's a quote that says, no one's a prophet in their own land. I know that when I talk about youth issues in my household with my 3 teens to 20-year-olds, they're like, Dad, come on, get with it. And I'm like, all right, I have no credibility with my own 20-year-olds. But, when you go back, the key is understanding how, if you want to work with donors like USAID, understanding what their model is in the system. It doesn't mean you have to work with USAID, but we want to work with you. That's the key. So let me give you 3 ways to do it. And if you ever want it, I've got a 2-page spreadsheet that Abulaji or Kenna can send to you guys. We put it up on Youth Lead, and it goes through detail by detail with hyperlinks. All right, so you can just hyperlink to the whole thing. So number 1, while you are here in the U.S., go meet some of our implementing partners. So groups like FHI 360, Creative Associates, DAI, Chemonics. These are the big organizations that run a lot of our projects. Because of the bureaucracy of USAID and because we respond to Congress to have to turn in reports on financial and things, we have to work through really large organizations that have that capacity. I guarantee you, none of you would ever want a direct funding from USAID. And I'll tell you why. You would spend your entire time doing paperwork, financial and reporting, and you would lose your mission of doing the program upfront stuff. Yeah. However, that's not good enough because we stink at getting resources to frontline youth-led organizations. And part of my mission this year and last year is figuring out how do we open new mechanisms to do that. One of the ways is putting more emphasis on our big partners to do sub-grants, but sub-grants that give you enough administrative overhead so you're not doing all this work for big organizations but not getting the resources you need to build your own organization. So when you're partnering with one of these organizations, you need to know how much you need in overhead so that your organization back there is developing and growing, that you're getting the mentorship, you're getting the resources you need. So first, go meet with these organizations while you're here. Say, I'm Abulaji, I am in Nigeria. When I go back in 2 months, I'm working with this organization. I know from the USAID forecast, there's these new projects coming up in Nigeria. I would like to work with your organization as one of your partners. And you start that conversation, you get to know who those people are. And so you have that relationship with some of them. And you understand how they work. 2, you get to know, what does USAID do in your country? If you type in USAID and then the name of your country, you will see a whole page pop up. It'll tell you who the point of contact is in Washington that you could go meet with, who's the point of contact in your country and the address, the list of the projects we run, and you get a sense of what that is. There's also something called the forecast. Forecast comes out every 4 months and says all the new projects that we're going to do in any of your country. And so at that point, you again should be thinking, who can I partner with where we might be able to be a part of that process to access USAID resources? 3rd thing, when you go back, join those alumni networks. And as part of those networks, get to know some of the USAID staff and invite them to come speak there, because it's people to people. People hire people who they see face to face. People support people they get to know face to face. I've hired hundreds of people in my career. I gotta tell you, if you want to double or triple or quadruple the percentage chance that you get hired, make sure you meet that person who's hiring face to face. It's so much more compelling to look in someone's eye and hear their story and say, I would trust that person. I think they can do it. The same is true about investing. I worked for a foundation for years, and it's when you sit down with someone that you really understand, are these people for real or not? And so that's one of the things. The last thing I would just say is we are increasing some of our other tools for how you can partner with USAID. So one of the ways is what's called Grand Challenges. We did last year Young Women Transforms. So we funded a lot of young women entrepreneurial programs around the world with seed capital. We've got challenge grants on literacy and on ag and food security and on entrepreneurship development. We have business incubators that we fund. All of them are opportunities for you guys to get connected there. And then we have a whole model which is called GDAs. So it's a model where if you and your organization are putting up $1, you can come to us and say, we want to do a matching project together. That's a harder way to do it. I gave it to you in the order of which I would try and do it if I were in your chair. But the main thing is get to know people here in Washington, keep their cards, keep that relationship going on LinkedIn. Do the same when you get back to your country.
Thank you so much. I understand you've talked a lot about relationship building and also taking advantage of the resources available. So youth, that is something we should take advantage of and utilize as much as you can. To my 3rd question, so we have 70 rising social change leaders from 28 different countries in the room. And what skills do you recommend that they develop to help them advance their social sectors or their careers?
That's good. So how many of you know DevEx? Raise your hand. DevEx. Good. Oh, that's really good. So DevEx is kind of like, our Time magazine for the development field, at least, for a lot of. If you really care about the development field, I would read it on a regular basis because you learn so much about so many different issues in development. They write really well, and they cover topics. So about 2 years ago, they interviewed, I think, 150 leaders of development organizations, World Bank, USAID, all sorts of places. And they said, in 10 years, what are the skills that a young person needs to work in the development field? And the answers might really surprise you of what they said. So the number one thing that 150 leaders in development said is, a young professional coming into this has to be an integrator. So what does an integrator mean? So an integrator is someone who could take multiple fields of practice and understand the connections between GIS and data for decision making and what's going on in entrepreneurship and what might be going on in, political or electoral development. It's people who can make the link between different sectors and understand how different pieces of a system work together. So that's the number one thing. Can you describe, if we were to sit down and you were interviewing for a job at USAID, kind of how, in your position, you're touching on different parts of a system and what you're doing with the organizations you're working with and how you integrate. It also kind of means like, so it's understanding multiple specialties and those touch points between them. The second one is education is going up. So when I started, I got into development with just a bachelor's degree. But increasingly, there's a lot more people. When I started, there were probably 6 international development programs in the US. Today, there's 150 international development programs at universities in the US. There's a lot more coming in, and guess what? There's a lot, and you're lucky. I'm going to tell you why. Because there's a lot less opportunity for Americans getting into development than for international young professionals. Why? Because the capacity that you all have means that we don't need to send someone from the US over to Pakistan or India or Nepal or Malawi to do the work. We want young professionals from those countries. And that's what we're doing. We're hiring a lot more local staff. We have 10,000 staff in USAID around the world. The vast majority are all local. So, but typically, so the leaders in their survey said, must speak at least 2 languages. Arabic is the most prominent language that is being looked for right now. When we look at what areas there's going to be a lot of growth in, ag and food security, climate change, looking at conflict and security and democracy and governance, and then the whole area of employment entrepreneurship. Those are the big 5. And then I can't leave out health. Obviously, there's massive health issues, but within those, there's some sub-areas that we're looking at in the next 10 years that you'd want to focus on. We asked, what are the top 5 skills that a young development professional would need? Number 1 was flexibility in how they think, how they work in teams. Number 2, proficiency in how they implement and execute on project management. Number 3, and you don't have to write it down. I'll send you guys a copy of the survey if you'd like to see it. Number 3, how well do you work in teams? God, working in teams is hard. How many of you enjoyed team projects when you were in college? Did you have to work in teams? Yeah, you enjoyed it? Yeah. You are the only person who enjoyed it. Everybody. How many of you really were frustrated in working in teams? Yeah. So it's not easy, but guess what? That's your life. So I had to present to the USAID administrator on Thursday. He told me on Monday, and I don't often get a chance to meet with our chief, but on Monday he said, 2019 has had more protests by young people and social movements than any year since 1968. So there's a reason behind that. I mean, there's a kind of a backsliding in democracy, there's a rise in authoritarian tendencies, there's young people feeling that if their vote doesn't count, we can use our phone and we can mobilize 100,000 people in the street really quick. What's wrong with that model? It used to be 70% of peaceful, nonviolent protests succeeded in their aims. That number is now down to 30%. Over the last 15 years, it's gone from 70 to 30%. And yet it's still twice as effective as violent protest. So nonviolent protest, way more effective than violent protest, but it's decreasing. Why? Governments are understanding that it's easy to tamp down because a lot of times the social movements haven't done the hard work of organizing at the community level. So you can mobilize 100,000 people in a lot of countries really quickly. But just because you have them in the street doesn't mean you've done the hard work to figure out how you move beyond the protest. So one of my big efforts right now is to work with our missions to create what I call a bridge to trust. Civic education, civic engagement in school, out of school, leadership development, advocacy, as well as all the other options. And so that's one of the things we're trying to do with young people.
Thank you so much, Mike. Quick question. How many languages do you speak?
So I wish I could say I spoke a lot of languages. I only speak fluently Spanish and English. I speak a little bit of Portuguese. And then my 2 kids, they grew up in Latin America because we lived in Latin America a long time, they decided when they got ready to college that they wanted to go learn Arabic. And so they both went to Morocco for a year and learned Arabic. And now my son is in his junior year in Jordan, and he's studying there. So we were playing, how many of you know Exploding Kittens? Anybody know the game Exploding Kittens? All right, there. So this is like the #1 game, like it's a card game, but it's like voted #1 game this year. So if you get a chance, play Exploding Kittens. Sounds horrible, doesn't it, Exploding Kittens? But so it's this card game. We got it at Christmas time, we're playing it, and my son and daughter are like talking to each other in Arabic. And we taught them Spanish so we could control understanding what my kids were saying. So they're talking in Arabic, and we're like, you can't talk in Arabic because we don't know what you guys are saying. Oh, we're just chatting. Next day they admit they were totally cheating in Arabic in the card game. I was like, all right, so I got to learn Arabic now. So, but yeah, definitely, the U.S. does a horrible job of teaching languages. I am always impressed at how other countries do it, but you're doing the best thing possible. You know, immersion. The only way I learned Spanish was I moved to Mexico, then I moved to Dominican Republic, and I learned Spanish by immersion. So, I mean, that's the best way to learn. Yeah.
Thank you. I speak 3 languages, and now I want to learn Spanish. So maybe
good.
we can teach me.
We'll exchange. All right, good.
All right, okay. So a question.
Teach me Kiswahili.
I will teach you Kiswahili. So before we take questions from the audience, is there anything you'd like to ask the audience, maybe to help you in what you're doing in relation to your work?
Yeah. So I was mentioning to you just a minute ago, Youth Leadership 2.0. And, you know, one of the parts of positive youth development, we've looked at 30 years of research in all different environments, low, middle, high income countries, etc. And what gives young people grit? What gives them that sense of being able to be really resilient and thrive in that? One of the things we've learned, and I know some of you have heard about it, is a growth mindset. We do a lot of looking at soft skills, life skills, growth mindset. Growth mindset, when you first hear it, it's like, yeah, that sounds nice, you know, fixed mindset, growth mindset. When you look at some of the research on what the difference to us of how we talk about things, about how we even praise, like a recent study we found in our education programs, we tested 500 young people, and we praised half of them saying, you must be really smart, you must be really bright. In this group we said, you must have tried really hard, and you really applied yourself. Over the next 3 months, the difference in performance was 50 points difference. These people taking on harder tasks, and these people feeling so afraid that they would let us down because we thought they were really bright or beautiful or whatever. I'm here to tell you, you probably get told a lot, you're the best and brightest, or you're exceptional. That doesn't help you, nor does it help the young people and the people you work with. What's special about Atlas Core is that you applied yourself, you worked hard, you looked at a way to put in the effort to learn. That's what makes you exceptional, but the moment you think of yourself as the best and the brightest, that's gonna hold you back. The moment I tell my kids, you're so beautiful, you're so smart, they don't perform. I coach soccer and basketball. My #1 thing I say to them is, I don't care what the score is in this game and whether we win or lose. I care how well you prepare and how hard you work in the game. Score doesn't matter. And you know what? We typically do way better, because the moment I tell them that, you know, you're good, you're bad, we're out the door. Same with kids. So that's a good lesson for you throughout your whole life. I know people will tell you you're the best and the brightest. I'm here to tell you you're not. You're not. You guys are really like hard workers. You've stepped up. You took that road less traveled. My lesson #3. You were willing to risk. That's what's really special about you. And that's what's going to take you really far. So here's my question to you. I am trying to launch what's called the Global Leadership and Education for Advancing Development Initiative at Usaid. Our goal will be to help 1 million young leaders impact development in the next 10 years just through our programming. We know that leadership training like this, exchanges are good, but from all my conversations with young leaders around the world, it's not enough. They want mentoring, they want seed capital, they They want a stronger sense of networking that help them support them when they're like struggling. They go back and they're like, I thought I was going to be really effective here. People don't even want to hear my story, you know? And so like, where's my community of support so I don't lose faith? So what I would love to hear from you is, what would you like Usaid to do if we could improve our investment in youth leadership in the political, civic, economic, entrepreneurial, health, security area? What can we do better? That's my question for you.